given the dreadful news that we received yesterday about a fatal stabbing on the Craneford Way playing fields, it felt appropriate actually for both sets of wards, but particularly for St Margaret's and North Twickenham, given the location of that event, for us to have some time for residents to engage with both the council and police over the matter. So my name's, I should say, Councillor Alexander Amon. I'm one of the councillors for St Margaret's and North Twickenham for the purposes of this meeting. I'm also Deputy Leader of the Council and Chair of the Transport and Air Quality Committee. But we're very fortunate this evening, given the dreadful event that I described a moment ago, to have with us the Neighbourhoods Inspector for the police locally, John McLaughlin, with us. And what I really want to do, beyond just saying first and foremost that the police have been engaging very constructively with the council over this desperately sad news, is to extend, of course, the council's condolences to the family of the victim of that particular fatal stabbing, and to recognise that within the course of, I think, what we're going to spend some time on now, there will be a limited amount that, of course, the police and indeed the council will be in a position to say about that situation. But certainly I think it's incredibly helpful and reflects extremely well on the police force operating within the borough. They felt able and willing and keen even to participate in engaging in this process tonight, which obviously was not constructed for that purpose and rather sadly has to try and fulfill it. I may come in briefly later, but I think what we want to do is just allow initially, if it's possible, John, for you to make a few remarks about the situation, and then we'll try and take a few questions. We're aiming to limit this part of the session to a 15-minute-ish window to try and ensure that the remainder of the planned business can be gotten through. But clearly, if there is, really a very strong theme of questioning that can be constructively contributed to, we'll look at what flexibility there is. But John, could I ask you to perhaps just say a little about the situation insofar as you can?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, and obviously welcome to everyone who's joined the meeting. It goes without saying, I offer the condolences of the Metropolitan Police to the family. It's a tragic circumstance, and I have to reiterate, this is a really, really rare occurrence, what has happened. And again, it makes it very difficult for me in my position to obviously give the full facts to the community, because my ultimate goal is to offer reassurance to yourselves, those who live, those who work, and obviously anybody who attends the local schools. There are press lines out, official press lines. They have been out since this morning in relation to the incident. Again, all I can say is that there's an active ongoing investigation. There are officers that are currently down in Craneford Way. There is quite a large scene at present. It's highly likely that scene will go on for potentially another 24, 48 hours. Again, we have to be guided by the senior investigating officer in what we do and how we do it. But it goes without saying, the way these matters are investigated, we try to do it in an efficient manner as quickly as we can, because ultimately we want to offer the community total reassurance of their own safety, and for us to do that, then we have to ensure that things are done correctly, but they're done in an expedient manner. I can't really talk too much in relation to the investigation, so I do apologise for that, because I know there's probably questions that people have immediately they want to ask. I can only say to you that from our point of view, from the community point of view, we've worked very closely today with the MP, Munro Wilson, with the council lead, and we're also working hard with the college and the council themselves. Obviously, the council lead being Gareth Roberts, who I've spoken to both of them today at the venue. In regards to my officers, we will have a visible patrol of officers in and around the area and the college, to offer reassurance. I do ask that if you do have any concerns, please do speak to the officers. Again, if there's information that people know or have, then we're happy to talk to you. We will be as honest as we can with you, but again, you have to be mindful. You cannot give too much information. And again, going forward, we're working with our schools teams who are in and around inside the schools across all the boroughs, because we're very mindful of the effect that this will have, especially on the people that actually witnessed it, because at the time there were school children present who did witness certain parts of the incident. Again, I've reiterated to my key partners that as soon as I am given information, I will pass that on as quickly as I can, because ultimately we want to reassure you that you live in a safe environment. We're here to help and protect you. And, I can only do that in that manner. I don't really think there's much more else I can add at this time. I'm more than happy to take questions, but again, all I'll say is I can't give you any answers in relation to the ongoing investigation, but I'm more than happy to speak about any sort of community policing issues or reassurances for yourselves.
Thank you very much, John. I think what we'll do is, if possible, for anyone that has any questions, if you could just very briefly put them in the chat function. I'll try and draw out a few, if there are any, to put to you in a moment. All I really wanted to add to what John, I think, is very sensibly conveyed to us this evening is that I understand that the police have committed to putting on an additional sort of visible presence locally in terms of reassuring residents beyond obviously the investigation you're undertaking, and that will take place over the coming days. And that's right, John. If we can unmute John. We're having trouble, perhaps. Could someone? Yeah.
Sorry, it's probably my phone, but yes. Absolutely.
No, it's fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I've got a comment here that is. So I've got a hand raised from Hamish, but could you perhaps put your question as a thank you, Hamish. So I've got them now. Now again, John, obviously you may not be in a position to answer some of the points made here, but I'll put them to you nonetheless, and of course say what you can say. And it's also perfectly understandable that you may have to say that due to the investigation, you're not in a position to make comments on elements of this. But one of our residents, Steve O'Shea, has made a reference to, I think, some discussion that has suggested that the victim may have been an Afghanistan national, and they just wondered what steps were being taken to ensure support, integration and safety of refugees. Well, I think that's more broadly a question for the combined authorities that govern that, rather than necessarily a police question. But I'm assuming you're not in a position to say anything further about that at this stage, are you, John?
No, unfortunately I can't at this stage. Obviously, questions in relation to the people concerned can be answered at a later time. But the reason I can't is because I've spoken to the senior investigating officer, and the press lines that have been put out are the lines that she would like put out at this time. And
understood.
No further sort of information.
Understood. So I think if for those of you that have questions, well, clearly I know there'll be a great deal of interest specifically in the circumstances here. I think what we're hearing from the police is that, the wider issues of safeguarding and reassurance and police activity is certainly open to question, but I think it'd be very difficult for them to make remarks specifically on the case at hand. One question was to ask whether there'd be a plan to hold some face-to-face community meeting, including council, college is suggested here, and discuss plans to reduce risks associated with future occurrence like this. I guess, and that's from Hamish, John. I mean, I guess from my side, I'd say, we would certainly be very happy as councillors within the ward to organise something locally, and I suspect you'd be happy to be involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously that's going probably forward into next week or a little bit, but absolutely, yeah, more than happy to come to those meetings. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I think there's more questions about prevention here. One comment is that there seems to have been a drop from a Karen Truman. There seems to have been a drop in police presence around Twickenham since before COVID-19. And the suggestion is that recently it feels as though certainly crime has increased in the area. Will this event in itself kind of result in a different or increased police presence going forwards?
I mean, going forward, since COVID times, and obviously we've had the Extinction Rebellion protests and now Insulate Britain, a lot of our resources or local resources have been pushed into other roles, into central London or sort of doing a commitment. So I do appreciate what people are saying about a lack of senior police officers. In the short term, yes, we will have, I'm flexing my officers over to have a greater presence in and around this area for the time being. And going forward for myself across the Richmond boroughs from the community strands, we are looking at changing how we work, working more together as ward officers so that we have a greater visibility within the community, and obviously we can speak to people and be contactable. So that's my challenge coming into this new role with the resources I have at this time. Okay,
thank you. And I've got a comment really from Mr. Michael J, simply saying that he's not desperately persuaded by the argument the reassurances of much use after the event, and is asking how can it be a safe environment when an incident like this can happen during the day. He's suggesting the lack of police is a factor in controlling knife culture. I mean, it's a very far-reaching question, I appreciate, but I mean, John, do you have anything to say on that?
No, I mean, again, if I had the capability, yes, we would have more officers visible on the street. We do our best to be as proactive and as active as we can. Again, we do have commitments. We are abstracted, but unfortunately, I can only reiterate this is a very, very rare incident that's happened. And again, tragically, it's happened in Richmond on a playing field outside of school. It's very hard for us to mitigate this, but I do agree that, yes, if we had more officers, it's more of a deterrent. And again, going forward, we are looking at how, or I'm looking at how I utilise my officers more efficiently so that we can be, in the community more, so that we can hopefully deter events like this happening again.
And I think it'd be fair to say that this is also about collaboration. So regardless of the detail of this specific case within this locality, there are a range of different actors, I suppose, that can help to try and make this environment feel and be safer. The police are one of them, but various other organisations, the council, in terms of our activities, the relevant kind of other stakeholders like the college and the school sites and so on can all also play a role, as can residents. And I think it's probably about us doing our best in a cumulative effort to try and improve on the situation, as I say, somewhat abstract from the specific case, but to make sure that people feel reassured that the environment they're living in is quite as safe as we know the evidence shows, notwithstanding this dreadful event.
Yeah, we do have a very good working relationship with the council and obviously Park Guard and likewise with the security team at Richmond College, who have, what they've done has been phenomenal over the last 2 days. And I can only praise them for what they've had during experience and the assistance they've given us. So yes, we do work together. I know it's difficult for people to see that, but I can tell you that we have a really good relationship with our partners. And again, hopefully going forward, from my point of view, I'll be looking at ways that we can, as a police service, be more visible within the community.
Sure. I mean, just to wrap up, given the questions that I'm seeing in front of me are somewhat directed in the same direction as some of the previous ones I've raised. I mean, Nicola Meadley has responded to the point I just made that she lives on Craneford Way and she's not sure what role she can play in preventing this kind of incident. I guess my response, and I don't know whether you want to add anything, John, is that no one's in any way suggesting that there was a responsibility, as it were, on a resident like her for preventing this incident. But I think what we can say is that there are undoubtedly ways that we can all contribute towards reducing the overall risk of crime, and one of those is, of course, about reporting some of the incidents of behaviour that perhaps we think twice about doing, and that can help to prevent certain instances of crime. But in this situation, I don't think there's any there's any attempt at finger pointing at this stage. At the very least, I think we need a thorough investigation conducted by our police force, and hopefully from that we'll find out what indeed was the circumstances. But the loss of life is of course appalling, and my experience of speaking with residents on the doorstep was very much of shock and upset at what had taken place on their doorstep.
No, I totally agree. I mean, we don't want people going out and challenging people, but again, vigilance is key to this. And I mean, Neighbourhood Watch is, we link in with them all the time. And again, that's a fantastic tool for us to get information back. But I appreciate people have in the past called the police. They've called 101. They found it difficult to communicate with their local ward officers or DWOs. And again, going forward, I'm looking to change the way that you can contact your ward officers to make that easier, so that information can come directly to us, so that we can address these or any issues in a more efficient, quicker way, and have a better capability.
Okay. Well, look, I'm conscious that you have other work you have to undertake now, sadly, and so I'm not going to elongate this conversation. But clearly, you've made clear that the police will have a visible presence, and for locals in the area, if they have any concerns, any questions, anything they want to raise, there will be officers on hand that they can speak to. And from the council's perspective, our details are on the website. We're here tonight. If residents want to raise anything specifically with us, we're very happy to pick those up.
Thank you.
Thank you, John, and appreciate you contributing on what is dreadfully sad news. Would prefer, of course, not to be discussing this evening, but thank you for making the time. So, on that basis, I'm going to now hand back to the formal chair of this meeting, who take us back into the originally intended agenda. We may come back across this subject matter as part of the course of the wider agenda, but that kind of concludes the abnormal edition, the sad abnormal edition of this particular part of the agenda. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you very much, and thank you also to our colleague from the police for joining us. I am not from your area, but let me add my condolences to those that have been affected by this, and clearly there's a feeling of shock in the virtual room tonight, and my thoughts are with all in the community. My name is Paul Clement. I'm CEO of an organisation called Locust Management, and if it's possible after that, I'm going to try and bring us back to the main purpose of this evening's meeting, which was intended to be a discussion around high streets. But before I set out the process for this evening's meeting, it's right now to hear some updates from our councillors. So let me first of all introduce the councillors who have joined us. First of all, and please just wave at this point, councillors. Richard Baker, who's the lead on business and economics. Councillor Jeff Acton from St Margaret's and North Twickenham. Councillor Ben Koza from St Margaret's and North Twickenham. Hi, Ben. Councillor James Chard from Twickenham Riverside. Councillor Roger Crouch from Twickenham Riverside. And to give us the update from that ward, come off mute, please. Let me introduce you to Councillor Julia Needham-Watts. Julia.
Thank you very much for that, and hello everyone. And I do share that sense of shock that you've spoken about. It's quite hard now to focus our minds on, I'm sorry, just a moment. You need to be quiet, please. I'm sorry, I'm sharing this room. It's to focus our minds on what we were originally going to talk about. But I just wanted to mention a few things in Twickenham Riverside ward that are quite exciting. First of all, the Twickenham Riverside development. This is the scheme by Hopkins Architects for the derelict bath sites. This is now being considered by planning officers. Key aspects of the scheme that we as ward councillors are really quite excited about include the removal of cars from the waterfront, freeing up space for river-based activities, which is something that young people that we talk to are also very keen to see. More publicly accessible open space and a much better link up from the river to the town of Twickenham itself, and drawing the River Thames back into the town, if you like, and with trees and with planting. James, Roger and I are looking forward to a realistic prospect now of having this site brought back to life at last. We've also got the Marble Hill Play Centre's proposal coming to Planning Committee in the next few weeks. This is a project to reinvigorate the Play Centre site at Marble Hill Park with the creation of a charity hub And they're aiming to retain the ethos of adventurous outdoor play that the site is associated with, but to introduce accessible facilities to make it much more inclusive to families and children across the borough. It's a sensitive parkland location, so obviously the design is important, and transport and other matters need to be carefully considered. So moving on to East Twickenham, we're also really pleased to have unlocked investment to get the pavements and the road surface into shape, to improve the greening and make the shopping area just a much pleasanter and safer place to come and shop, especially for pedestrians. And we've engaged with the community, including our wonderful local traders, to make sure this works as well as possible for them, as well as people visiting and moving through the area. Talking of pedestrians, we've really enjoyed the results of the pedestrianisation of Church Street, which has brought a real sense of life and community to that part of town. Hopefully we'll touch on some of those themes later on in our breakout sessions and when Paul talks about bringing life back to our town centres. And especially the recent High Tide Festival had that sense of enjoyment that we've realised is so important to communities. Something else that we as ward councillors are keen to do to support local community projects is to listen to your ideas for the local area fund, which is a fund for relatively small sums of money based on local people, local organisations' ideas about improvements to the local area that will benefit the local community, whether that's on biodiversity or cultural idea or local history projects. We'd just like to say, anyone who's got an idea that needs a bit of support, keep your eyes coming. We love to hear from you, and we'll try and get some more of these interesting projects underway. That's the whistle stop tour from Twickenham Riverside. So looking forward to discussing more with you later, but now I'll hand back to the chair. Thank you very much.
Councillor, and I never think anybody actually on these sessions should ever apologise for interruptions in the room. I think one of the real delights of using Zoom, there haven't been that many, but the real delights of meeting, we don't just meet you, but we meet the whole family as well. So please don't feel you should apologise. Right, very finally then for award update, we're going back to Councillor Eamon for St Margaret's and North Twickenham. Councillor Eamon.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you be careful what you wish for is all I'd say, because I've got 3 children and 3 boys under 5, and I'm hoping very much that they'll stay on the floor where the bathroom is. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. I mean, obviously, I start by saying, sadly, right at the top of the list has to be where we started in terms of the agenda and, you know, the preeminent impact on our residents right now. And I've been out, as I mentioned earlier, on the doorstep with Councillor Kosa and Councillor Acton has been to reassure our residents in light of this very disturbing situation in terms of the stabbing fatality in North Twickenham. But more on that as residents feel the need to discuss more. I think the other issue that would have probably been top of my list were it not for that dreadful news is that is the big campaign that we're presently fighting as councillors on residents' behalf, which is the proposed reductions in train services, particularly affecting St Margaret's Station. The idea is that services will move from 4 services an hour to only 2. Is dreadfully bad news, of course, for residents served by St Margaret's Station, but also I fear is also will have very negative impact on Twickenham Station itself too, of course, which serve many of our both wards combined residents, because actually the risk will be of overcrowding of both the station and of the services operating through it under those proposals. Both the council and ward councillors, I've responded to the consultation both as chair of the Transport and Air Quality Committee on behalf of the council, but also as a ward councillor, and I know my colleagues have also made representation. We're fighting those proposals very hard, and we'll be pressing the Department for Transport to overturn any decision to proceed with them if indeed South West Railway are foolish enough to do so. On the flip side of sort of station related points, you know, some positive news that predates that. There obviously have been a number of changes to St Margaret's Station which have been for the benefit. The council co-funded now quite some time ago, but prior to COVID, I think, but upgrades to the station in terms of step-free access via Amiens Park Road, which is now working and accessible and has been an incredibly long journey to try and make happen, but is now in place. And also residents locally will have noticed that the pedestrian footbridge over the station
is been fully refurbished and repainted to in its previous livery to a very high standard, and is now in excellent condition, despite, of course, the day that it was launched being graffiti, and it has that has been corrected, and we're fighting a tough battle on graffiti, both on that station, on that structure, but also more broadly. But I think it's a very worthwhile improvement, both to the kind of structural integrity and the aesthetic of that particular bridge. Those with children like myself will also notice that the council have made investments recently in both Moormead and Grimwood children's playgrounds. Grimwood particularly has had a complete overhaul with new equipment and some very, very appealing designs on the ground for children to play around. And I can testify to the fact that it has reached the seal of approval of at least my three children, and I think that's been a very, very positive development for a playground that was probably ailing a little bit in terms of the facility they it provided. I would also say that I think we're very close now. I don't think it's yet been launched, but we're very close to as councillors being able to launch a consultation on proposed changes to Railshead Road in the North St Margaret's area. There's a road that joins to the Riverside, the Twickenham Riverside pathway there, and is at present a pretty hostile space for cyclists and for walkers because of very, very narrow pavements that are actually partially parked on. And what the proposals that will be in front of residents shortly will be to create a much more shared space environment, and thereby improve the pedestrian amenity available in what is a very tight and constrained space. So we welcome views in due course on that, but that will be a very significant financial uplift for the road concerned. The only other two things really I had to mention, one quite short and one a little more detail, was that the council have also separately, and your ward councillors have been pressing for improvements along the A316 Chertsey Road corridor, particularly for pedestrian and cycling improvements. Unfortunately, the facility itself, the A316, is in the control of Transport for London, and as of yet, we haven't had any firm commitments to any uplift, despite us as a group of ward councillors being successful in pressing the council into actually being willing to invest money in that. So the council's made two significant contributions. One in having engaged consultants to try and design and assess the possibility for improving, where possible, segregated cycling and walking facilities along the A316. And secondly, has written to Transport for London, offering to even make a financial contribution towards the uplift of those facilities, even though the road itself is in Transport for London's sole ownership. So we will keep pressing. At the moment, I don't have solid news on that, but you should know that your councillors are pressing hard, and that the council as a whole have made strong overtures in support of that. And then lastly, I think from my sort of top line list was just, I have to mention the Moormead Pavilion, which is obviously increasingly dilapidated and has relatively recently been fenced off from usage. I think, without wishing to have a very lengthy intervention on this, because the history is lengthy and detail is plenty, but I think where we are at the moment is we do have an application with the planning department from the Moormead FC grouping that are seeking to revivify the facility through the construction of a new pavilion, which ward councillors have supported. I understand that had reached a significant impasse in terms of an objection from Sport England, which I also now understand from the intervention of Moormead and FC and from some of the efforts of the council's officers has now been withdrawn. So I'm hoping that in due course, process notwithstanding, that an application will be considered by the planning committee. I can certainly say on behalf of the three councillors for St Margaret's and North Twickenham, such an application will have our support, and we will speak strongly in favour of it. What, of course, the decision of the planning committee is within the bounds of the planning considerations is, of course, for them. But I am keen, I'm seized, as the three of us are, to see progress on this. The pavilion has been decrepit, if not out of action, for far too long, and the community deserves an asset that, frankly, it would make extremely strong use of. That's me.
Well, Councillor, thank you very much. And unwittingly there, you strayed into residents' questions, because one of the questions that had already come through in the chat was the Moormead Pavilion. So thank you very much for covering that off. I am most grateful. You will have a chance to ask questions of your councillors towards the end of the session this evening. Because of time constraints, I'm only going to use the chat function. So if you do have questions that don't relate to the high street, to other matters, post them in there. I can't promise that we'll cover every single one, but I will do my utmost to cover as much as I possibly can. Anyway, to the main agenda then of the evening, which was always intended to be the future of high streets. My job, I think, is to just contextualise your discussion about your high streets with what is actually going on across Britain's high streets more generally. And there is no doubt this is a period of enormous structural change. It isn't economically cyclical. It won't recover in the way that high streets have in the past. And it is going to mean fundamental change at the local level. Now, let me destroy one myth very quickly, which is all of this is to do with COVID. Well, it isn't. The majority of the changes that you're seeing on your high streets, and certainly that you're seeing on Britain's high streets generally, was underway long before COVID. COVID happened to hit the accelerator pedal and get us to the point that we're at more quickly than we would otherwise have done, but it isn't the root cause. The root cause actually is changing consumer habits. The root cause is the way you and I are interacting with our high streets. What have we learned from the last 18 months, though, is that actually the local and our local community, and my goodness, this evening, if this is not more profound than ever, really matters to us much more than it ever did. We want to support the local. We want to look after one another, and that will feed directly into the future of our high streets. We're not going to be able to rely on retail in the way that we have in the past. Huge numbers of retailers are finding it very difficult to trade in bricks and mortar now, and there's lots of reasons for that. It's not just online trading, and it's not just business rates cost. It is a whole plethora of different reasons, but we are going to have to think beyond retail in terms of future modelling of our high street locations. We, though, are going to be spending more time in our locality, because there's no doubt that one of the legacies of COVID is going to be more hybrid forms of working. Whereas we may have been at our desk 5 days a week in central London or wherever, that's not going to be the case anymore. We're going to be expected to work locally on a proportion of our working week, and that means, therefore, what is around us in our local community, our high street, becomes much more relevant. Places are competing with one another more strongly, and homogenisation of high streets, you know what I mean. Every retailer that took space on any high street turned the building into exactly the same model. That was their footprint. That nuanced effect will change, that localism will change, and more local retailers will come forward. And residential trends, whilst they were tipped to change hugely because of COVID, people fleeing large urban centres and wanting to live away from the terrible virus in the middle of rural countryside, actually that trend has been proved wrong. There is still great demand to live close to large urban centres, particularly amongst younger generations who are beginning to move out of this COVID pandemic, perhaps in a different way to many of us on this call. So some ground rules for this evening, as hard as it is in the atmosphere that we've got, it's to be positive, and it's to look forwards, and it's to think constructively about our high streets. It's going to be very easy to come out of this with a large shopping centre of stuff, a large shopping list of stuff that we would like to see happen, but we can't look to the council to make that happen for us. There's no local authority anywhere in Britain that will be able to solve these problems on its own. It's a real partnership community approach. Let me give you one example. It's going to change the nature of the premises on your high street. They are not owned by the local authority. They'll probably be in varied private ownership. So this is very much about the council having brought us together, being prepared to listen to our views, demonstrating leadership, forging a way forward, having a strategy for the future, but we can't look to the local authority to solve all of the problems. So this evening's community conversation comes out of a partnership conference that I was lucky enough to attend in 2021. It came out with 5 main themes, which I'd like you to think about as you go into the breakout rooms and discuss your high streets. The first theme was that people in the conference wanted their town centres, their high streets, their shopping parades to be thought of as destinations, places to go and do stuff, not places to go and buy stuff. Theme number 2 was, we need to think about our high streets and our shopping parades around us, people, not just around business. They need to be people focused. The third theme was a much more balanced footprint. Yes, some retail units will in the end become vacant, but let's just not expect another retailer to take them. Let's think about a whole variety of uses that, if on our high street, will bring them to life 24/7, 365 days a year. The fourth theme was, let's be really creative, and let's encourage our local authority to be really creative with us. So whereas historically it might have been a retail unit had a planning consent for retail and nothing else, if another viable use comes forward that we'd like to see there, let's make sure it gets the consent that it needs. And then the elephant in the room in many conversations came forward as a positive thing in the discussions we had in May, which was digitalization. Yes, we can all sit at home and we can shop on the internet. We know that. We know we don't potentially have to go to our high streets for anything anymore. But actually the theme was very much, no. Bring our high street to live online and make sure that when we're there, our mobile devices can empower us in a different way than we may otherwise be used to. So with that in mind, we've got a very short video that I think we're going to show you now, which gives you some views of your high streets now, and maybe just will plant some extra seeds as you move into your discussions. Hopefully we can play the video now.
I think Twickenham has maintained, retained a lot of its character. I think the Riverside is still fabulous, the parks are still fabulous. We've still retained some of the nicest pubs, which I think is important. I mean, Eel Pie just down the road, the White Swan pub. So no, I think actually in 30 years it's retained a lot of its character.
I just love the community feel of it, you know, the people. You get a real sort of, there's a real sort of hum about the place as well. And it's not like, you know, the clone cities when you've got the Costa and everything, you know, you've got your nice little shops around, very artisan, very sort of.
I love Twickenham. I love the fact we've got the river, we've got a boat, so we have lots of fun on the river. And I love Church Street, and once the Riverside is finally sorted out, but that's been a debate for the whole time we've lived here.
I think I like it because it's got small boutiques, you've got the clothes boutiques, you've got the coffee shops. I think it's really good. Since COVID, we've got more seating outside, so I think that's a positive. No, I really like St Margaret's.
I think we need a lot of investment in this part of East Twickenham, Richmond. We certainly need a lot of the infrastructure improved, the pavements, the road, that sort of thing. We need to just, and it needs a general tidy up, but it needs to be something that we can all work on together.
I don't think we need the big changes. I think we need those indie quirky things. From my perspective, from my point of view, is that is the future of the high street, that kind of retail experience that you can't get online. You know, where you can go somewhere which is individually different.
To get here, it's easier to cycle than drive because the parking here is so bad. So I'd say the only problem with St Margaret's that I think of is, first of all, they should maybe close a few roads and turn them into more cafe, continental kind of places. And the other thing, I think they should sort the traffic out because that's a busy road, the A316, and people will use this road as a cut through to Richmond. And I don't see any reason why they just can close people from turning into this road. If you look behind you now, you'll see traffic nose to tail and it's horrendous.
Well, thank you very much. So we're about to put you into breakout rooms. Don't worry, you don't have to do anything at all. We will move you seamlessly, magically into breakout rooms, and at the end we will move you back. You're going to have about 25 minutes in those breakout rooms to talk about 3 questions. So be clear. The first question is, we want to know what you use your current high street town centre shopping parade for. Do you use it more often now? Do you use it at a different time of day? Do you go there for different things? If you go in the evening, why do you go in the evening? Or why do you not go in the evening? So your use of the high street, number 1. Number 2, we want to know what you'd like to see on your high street. More of something, less of something. It might say that nothing could be improved, but you might want things like more green spaces, greater uses of pavements, different kinds of shops, amenities, cycle lanes, events, or my goodness, it could be anything. Number 2. And then number 3, what's the idea that you have that will really transform your high street and move it forward? Now, please do blue sky think, but try and be realistic at the same time. But let's come up with something that's really, really innovative. Be positive, be constructive, think big, and think differently is my briefing to you. As we go into the breakout rooms, can I ask the facilitators, whereas we normally have enough time for everybody to introduce themselves, keep that to a minimum so that you dive straight into the first question. And to those residents that are going into the breakout rooms, there are clearly two big topics that could dominate the whole discussion. They need to be talked about, but they can't dominate the whole thing. The first is clearly the Riverside development, and I know there's a whole range of views on that. You need to reference it, but let's not focus the whole thing on it. And secondly, because of the last 24 hours, you could talk about crime and social behaviour for the entire period of time. And again, it needs to play its part, but it mustn't be allowed to dominate. So as if by magic, we're going to move you into the breakout rooms, and in about 25 minutes time, we'll bring you back here. Don't forget, if you've got questions of your councillors, in the chat function, please, which I will be monitoring. Try and enjoy the next 25 minutes. I'll see you soon. You see, moved seamlessly from here into breakout rooms and back again, and you didn't feel a thing. How very Doctor Who-ish. I spent a bit of time in each of the breakout rooms. I can't for a moment say that I'm going to capture all of the views here. That would be ridiculous, but let me talk you through just some of the things that I heard. Church Street is great. Our high street must involve us. It's got to really draw us in. Food and drink was a key to another person. And somebody else said, when there's a buzzy atmosphere, I absolutely love it. Somebody else made us think about homeless people and other vulnerable people, and where do they go when they need help on our high streets? Too much traffic was a repeated theme. Different experiences are important. I don't want to go there every day and see the same stuff. I want it to change. Being near people and being outdoors now seems so special post-COVID. Empty shops, they're very sad, said one person, but change is really good. Independent retailers came through in many of the groups as being really vital, and actually services rather than retail seen as important, as long as services involves coffee, which I have to say the word coffee came up in every single one of the groups that I attended. Is it possible to curate a high street given the various ownerships? Because it's not just so much about what we want, it's how we actually get there. Sustainable traffic over car use, give us more excitement. We must keep what's best, and we really have to shout about it better. The traffic is absolutely crazy, said one person, and we need more bike lanes. Performing arts added to the excitement, and there were too many, quotations, flashy clothes and, yeah, you've got it, coffee shops. Pollution is far too high. Crown Road could be the next Church Street. Train frequencies, which we heard from the councillors earlier, came through as an issue. We need more and better restaurants. We need to link to our parks, but what we do need to do is bring more greenery in and around our high streets. Somebody else talked about noisy and smelly buses, and why are the buses not more eco-friendly? Richmond, well, Richmond really does need improvement, said one person, but on our high street we need more live music. We must look at speed limits, and you want to sort out the HGV crisis. You don't want HGV vehicles anywhere near your high street. Let's bring about a cafe pavement culture. We never think about the impact of the rugby, both positive, but also on days when it happens, it's a negative effect on retailers. And then let's have an outdoor cinema. Let's have many more events, maybe a destination for events. And somebody else said, let's have a local delivery service so that when I buy various items, I can land them in one place and they get delivered to me. And then Katie Mansfield reflected, and I think realised that's what a butler does. But there was one brilliant quote from somebody who said this. They'd moved into the area just before COVID. And what they said was, and I quote, until COVID, it was a place to live. But since COVID, it has felt like my home. Right, and there was one other suggestion. So councillors, please come off mute now. We're going to do this as quickly as we can because we've got 10 minutes left. And I'm going to go through some of the questions that we've got asked originally. It came up in 2 of the rooms that I was in. And it was also a question asked in the chat function. Any councillor may take this, but the question is, why can you not organise the Lido being opened again? Any councillor may answer. If not, I'll pick on one of you.
I think I defer to the Riverside councillors on that one.
Okay, one of the Riverside councillors. Who's going to take this one?
Yes, I'm happy to take it.
Off you go,
When we looked towards redeveloping the Riverside when we came into office in 2018, we developed a very open brief which allowed different people to come up with different ideas for that centre. And there were relatively few hard and fast rules, but one was that the pedestrians would be given priority, and another was that there would be at least as big a public open space as there is at the moment. There was a design competition, as I say, run by the Royal Institute for British Architects, and we had 5 really exciting designs that came through. In fact, one of them did include a pool, but it was not the most popular one, it has to be said. A lot of other people enjoyed the idea that Hopkins Architects came up with a destination point building at the Wharf Lane end, an enlarged public open space, which was a flexible space that could host a variety of events, not just swimming, but sort of a range of music events, markets, and so on. And I know that the Lido idea is very popular among some people, but it's not the only potential use of that site. And ultimately, I think that broadly, actually, people preferred that more sort of flexible use. Lovely though Lidos and so on are, and although one architect did come up with one.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, Councillor. I'm going to ask Councillor Needham-Watt to answer the following question, because you picked up on it earlier. We don't want to debate the Riverside development, the good and the bad things, please. One person, Rebecca H, has asked, can you just give me a timescale? When is it likely to be built?
Well, that depends very much on how it progresses through planning and other constraints around the site, such as sorting out ownership and leases and so on. In all honesty, Councillor Chard has been more involved with the process and probably has a better idea of timescales if he wants to come in with and give a month and stake his mortgage on getting the right month when it starts.
Okay, Councillor Chard, here is your question. We don't want any waffle. We want a month, and we want a year, and we want your mortgage on it.
Silence.
Well, where has he gone?
Where any good politician should when that question's asked, but I'm sure he's just preparing himself.
I think council officers were giving me time there by not allowing me to unmute myself. The current timeline is that we've got the planning application is likely to go to planning committee in December. We would then, if that was successful, be looking to procure a constructor to do the work. That construction contract would likely be let towards the summer next year, and we would hope for the work to start later in 2022. As Julia indicated, that does depend on some things over ownership and things like that, but we would hope to be moving ahead next year, and as Mac says, early 2024 is the current completion plan, but obviously it takes some time to do that work.
Good for you. Thank you very much. Until that final caveat, that was almost perfect. We're going to edit that final caveat out so that you state your mortgage on that date that you gave us. Right, okay. I don't know which council wants to take this. There was a question earlier on about the sidewalk that is next to Wags and Tails. Now, that doesn't mean very much to me, but it was seen as a pinch point and a hazard. And the request was, why can we not expand the sidewalk? Can somebody take that for me, please?
Well, I mean, it's in Riverside Ward, so they may want to say something, but I'll just say from the transport brief that I held that, I mean, it can be done. Curb line adjustments, as we describe them, are possible, building out the pavement. The issue is really a question of cost and making sure that obviously the carriageway necessary for vehicular movement still remains. So we can certainly look at that. I'm aware of the kind of pavement constraints along there. But I think it probably ought to be part of a wider consideration of whether we can make improvements to that corridor.
Okay, that's fine. So let me now turn to Church Street. Which of the councillors would be responsible for Church Street? Who's going to take a question on Church Street? Let me have a different question. Come off mute.
Well, depends what your question is. What's the question, Paul?
You see, Alexander, that's the trick. I need somebody to say yes before they hear the question. There's
Since everyone else stayed silent, I'll take it because it did go to my committee, but it's
Right.
in the Riverside ward again.
Okay, well, you're going to take the question.
I'm happy to take it if it's more.
Go on then, go on then.
Come
You take
on,
it.
James.
If you like.
If it's a nice one, James, you take it.
The two of you stop squabbling. I think I have this question right. Clearly Church Street came through as a huge asset, and it came through in all of the groups. So really positive stuff about what you and the businesses have done down there. But I think one of the questions was the removal of the cobbled street area. Now, does that make sense to you when I ask?
It does. Yeah.
Right.
I'll take it.
So go on.
It.
Why the heck? Why the heck have you removed it?
Well, it wasn't my decision is the simple answer. It's predated the Liberal Democrat administration that was elected in 2018. So you can blame our Conservative predecessors for that. And I completely agree. I think it has detracted from the overall environment. So whilst the flattening of the overall space, I think was a good decision. I think the use of the materials was not the best. And now I guess the question really is it worthwhile spending additional money to try and change materials when we have such fresh ones, relatively speaking, in place? And I think the view for the moment is not.
Okay, that's an honest answer. I'm most grateful for that. Thank you for taking it. One of the other councillors, come on, don't duck this. This has come through in every single one of the sessions that I've run in Richmond, and it has to do with electric scooters. The view has been very negative about electric scooters, whilst understanding that we need less cars and alternative means of transport. Very pointed question, though, from Patrick Kidner, which is, yes, we must support cycling, but we want you to control the increasingly, brackets illegal, close brackets, question mark, I'm not sure they are illegal as a trial, the use of electric scooters. Is there anything really that the council can do about this, or is it a TfL issue?
The risk of speaking again, the matter of the illegal e-scooters is purely a police matter. The council have no ability to take enforcement action against them whatsoever. The trial that is being held within the borough is legal, and those vehicles are compliant, and therefore, provided they do the things that they're meant to do and don't ride on pavements and so on, their activity is lawful. So, but with any of the matters involving e-scooters, it is a question of police enforcement, I'm afraid.
Okay, you might not like the follow-up question, and this is where you might want to defer to one of your colleagues. Once the trial is complete, and you know what you know from the trial, given where you're at the moment, would you support the permanent introduction of electric scooters?
Well, I think the whole point about a trial is that we don't know until we've got the full results and the jury's out. So I think the jury is out until the jury comes back in with a verdict. My view is that they're not personally for me. So this is my personal observation. I haven't taken to using them frequently for my own journeys. But if they work in terms of making sure that certain parts of the community use those over car transport, for example, then they will have performed a useful role. And provided the safety statistics that we have associated with them continue on the basis that I've seen, which are that we haven't had any serious incidents involving any of the rental scooters that are legal, I think the case could be compelling. But
okay, right.
As I say, not for me.
I'm going to let you off the hook here, and I'm going to go to two councillors who stupidly at the start of this question put their hand up, and I'm now going to land them with the same question. So, Councillor Roger Crouch, if you could come off mute for me, yes or no? Knowing what you know now, would you support the permanent introduction of electric scooters in your patch?
Yes, I would. We have to move to different forms of transport, but we need to make the users of those forms of transport more responsible. I'm worried that it's not compulsory to wear a helmet. Sorry, my daughter has now intervened. So
well, yes, it's only because she wants you to buy her electric scooter, for goodness sake.
She's got a non-electric scooter which she uses very responsibly on pavements.
All right, Roger, thank you very much. Let me go to Ben Koza. You put your hand up as well. Ben, I'm going to ask you the same question. Knowing what you know now, would you support the permanent introduction of electric scooters?
Well, yes. I mean, the reason I put my hand up was a different one. But in answer to your question, yes, I've tried the scooters myself. I like them as a vehicle, and I think they're a good way of getting about to the town and making short journeys, and they're a bit expensive at the moment. However, what I wanted to point out and stress was that this is a TfL trial, and that I think Councillor Eamon will correct me if I'm wrong. It will be their decision and not ours. Ours was just to let them try it in their borough.
I completely appreciate it's not your decision. Right, let me move to a different question which came up actually at the start, and it was, I think, linked to the last 24 hours events, but it was to do with the college in the borough. Again, councillors, you will know more about this than I. A suggestion there that perhaps it shouldn't be a college and should just be a larger school. Does anybody have a comment on that? The physical, the college itself. Who'd like to answer that?
If no one else is stepping forward, I mean, it's in St Margaret's, North Twickenham. Ben or Jeff, do you want to say anything, or would you like me to?
I'll just say that yes, it's very shocking, and it's at the moment we're all very affected by this event. But I think we've got to remember that we do have incidents with students from time to time, but we've got to remember that overall we are a very safe borough, a safe area, and I think rather than I mean, the sixth forms have certainly not made the college redundant, and in the past the college has produced some extremely good results. I would favour working with the police and with the college to bring in measures to make the surrounding areas safer, rather than try and do away with it altogether.
Okay, right. Another question that was asked in the chat during the breakout rooms has to do with the Eel Pie Island. Hopefully that makes sense to somebody. The question was, where are you expecting residents to park? Off you go. Yeah, go on, just shout out, Councillor.
Yeah. So I'm happy to come in on this one. So there's been quite a lot of work on parking provision by the Riverside, because obviously the development will result in the removal of some parking spaces. Quite a lot of those spaces will be made up by the redesignation of quite a lot of resident space, by quite a lot of redesignation of quite a lot of pay and display spaces as resident spaces in the immediate vicinity. And work has been done on the parking pressure that there will be post those changes. And whilst it will increase, we consider that the level of parking pressure in the vicinity of the Riverside will be manageable for residents. It will also, it has to be said, reduce the volume of traffic to quite a large degree in that area, because you will not get people going down there looking for pay and display spaces, because there will not be any in that immediate area.
Okay, Councillor, thank you very much. And I regret that we've reached the end of our session. I think it's been a session of really very mixed emotions, and I very much feel for all of you in the location, bearing in mind what's happened in the last 24 hours. Let me give you some reassurance, though, on the bit that I've hosted, which is all of the breakout rooms have been recorded. Everything that you've said has been noted down, and I have a commitment from the councillors that they will take those findings on all of the town centres that I've covered in the last 6 or 7 weeks, and they will form the part of the normal report process. So your thoughts won't be lost, they won't be forgotten about, and we will find a way of forming a future strategy for your high streets. In the meantime, though, it's 8:05. I'm sorry we finished 5 minutes late, but do have a very good rest of your evening, and thank you very much for the time that you've given us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.